everybody, my name is Bill. This is Rust to Resurrection. Now, in a previous video, I told you that not only did I want to do work on the Jeeps or work on the cars, but I also wanted to share some history, share some stories, and then bring you into the automotive culture as I experience it. Now, I own a 1970 Camaro. Now, if you've been following either this channel or the older original channel, you already know that. I've talked about it on more than a couple occasions. So I own a 1970 Chevy Camaro. And I inherited it from my brother. That's a story that I want to tell, but I want to tell that in a future video. I don't want to tell it here right now. I'm always fascinated by the origin story of things. For instance, over on my other channel, 6 Round Studio, where I do firearms restorations, I'm always interested in the origin stories on the manufacturers and on the rifles or the handguns that I restore. I'm always interested in the origin story on a car or a Jeep, and what it was, how it was made, how it was manufactured, where it came, how it came down through time, how it came through history. And I try to tell some of that on my videos. But the Camaro has been a difficult origin story to understand. Now, I've heard all these rumors, I've heard all of these possibilities, and sometimes what the forensics or what the car itself tells me sort of backs up what some of these stories are. But I've owned that car for 11 years, and I've been gathering data and information on the car for forever. I got an entire loose leaf binder full of it, where I've gone and tried to find as much information and facts about the car, but especially about the Chevy Camaro as I can. I've got my brother's original invoice or sales receipt when he bought the car, and I've got a lot of the repair receipts that he got for having work done on the car. But that was never quite enough for me. I always wanted to understand a little bit more about the car. The build sheet, if there ever was one, doesn't seem to exist. We haven't been able to find one. The only place we haven't looked is up over the gas tank. In order to do that, obviously we need to pull the gas tank. We haven't done that. So there may be one stuck up over the gas tank. So we don't know exactly how the car was built. But when we do the forensics, we're able to pick up some information. Now, the car is a Z28 clone. It was not a Z28 out of the factory. None of the body codes or body tags even suggest that it was a Z. This was a clone. It was a retro Z28 that somebody in the history of the car made. But there's a lot of things on the car that suggest other things, that it was definitely an RS, may have been an RS SS. We're not entirely sure about that, and we haven't been able to discover the truth of that up until now. But I mean, it has the F41 rear suspension sway bar. It's got a 4-speed manual with a Hurst shifter in it, 12-bolt main. It's got everything that suggests it was built as a higher performance car. But that was a long time ago, and there's been these changes made to the car, and it's those changes that we can't really get our finger on as to whether or not those are real or something that's been added later in the car's life. So when we look at the body tag, we're able to tell what the car came out of the factory as. So for instance, the year is 1970. 12487 is the factory code for Camaro V8 two-door coupe. So that is correct. The trim tag is 711, which is a black interior, which the car has a black interior. Then it has the body paint color is 51. On the tag, 51 was Daytona yellow. We haven't found any evidence of the Daytona yellow yet, but I'm sure we will. It has a B, which is a black vinyl roof, and the vinyl roof has come off that car, so that came off years and years ago. 02 is the date tag, which is February, and then the C is the 3rd week of February, so we know it was built, according to the body tag, the 3rd week of February. Now what's interesting is, and it was built in the Norwood factory. What's interesting about this car is it was built in the first month of production for the 2nd gen Camaro. GM had gone on strike. It had gone on a big strike, and they didn't come back until February, and February was when this car was built. So by the 3rd week, they were really in the very early build sequence on the new 2nd gen Camaro. So this car, my car, is a very early 2nd gen Camaro. So we know all that. We know that it's been painted. We know it's used to be Daytona yellow. Now it's in a red-orange color with the Z28 stripes. So what else do we know? Well, everything that we do, and when I'm heading down to see the car here in the next little bit, and when we get there, I'm going to do a video in front of the car, and we'll sort of go through the car itself and talk about the things that we know, some of the things we think we know. But again, a lot of this is something we can't prove at this point. But I learned some things recently, and those are the things that I think are most interesting to me. For instance, because I couldn't find anything out about the car, I know where my brother bought the car. He bought the car in Manchester, New Hampshire. So I knew that much, and I have the title records from my brother to me. But I'm a member of the AACA Vintage Car Club, and I was reading one of their issues, one of their magazines, and in that issue of the magazine, they were talking about a Chevy Corvette, a Corvette. And in the magazine, they were talking about how the guy who bought the car went to the National Motor Vehicle Title Information Search, NMVTIS, and said that he was able to get the title history of that Corvette. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that you could do that. So I went to the National Motor Vehicle Title Info Search website, and I began to search through the information that they had available, and sure as crap, there was a place that you could look up the title sequences of that car. Now, they won't tell you who owned the car, but they will tell you what state they were titled in. So I did that, and I came up with some pretty interesting lineage. And when I looked it up, because you look it up by VIN number. Now, they don't give you the information on the website. You have to go to a third party, and they provide links to these third parties that will actually do these searches for you. But they're approved by the national, I'm never going to remember, by the National Motor Vehicle Info Search division. So I started clicking through these and finally was able to find one that could identify the car by the VIN number. So when I found the one that would do it, I went in and I put in the search, but of course they're not going to give it to me unless I pay them money. So I had to sign up for their site, pay them the money they wanted by credit card to use the site, and the information, once they had the information, Well, they had information. They said they had information. And they said that they had a page of ownership history and the vehicle specs. Well, of course, the vehicle specs was something I was really interested in. So I looked it up. I paid the money, rather, and the information showed up on their website. And what I found out from them is that they listed this car as a 1970 Chevrolet Camaro V8 SS 396 series with the code I-34. That I-34 does not show up on the body tag, and that's where things get a little confusing. I did find a second search, and they did not, on the second search, identify it as a SS 396. They identified it as a standard V8 Camaro with a what is it, Turbofire V8, which would be just a standard 350. So at this point, I'm still not entirely sure how the car got delivered from the factory, what motor it had in it. Did it actually have a 396, or did it have just the 350? The problem is that the SS package, the 396, all the parts, or most of the parts, are there. So it's a little bit confusing for me to know at this point exactly how the car left the factory. But it did provide also the title transfers, and those title transfer dates is the first thing. In order to prove the efficacy, to prove that this information was accurate, the first thing I wanted to do was see the transfer of title to me, and it's here. So that was good. Then I wanted to see the transfer of the title from the people that my brother bought it from to him. And when I go through the dates on the sales invoice, the date on the sale invoice exactly matches the date on the transfer of title to my brother. So I know this is accurate information to that point. Now we had assumed that this car had come originally out of Massachusetts. Now I don't remember how we figured that out, but we thought, we were pretty confident that it came out of Massachusetts. So when I go back, in fact, it does show the car coming originally out of New Hampshire, out of Massachusetts rather, and its first title in Massachusetts was 1985. So by that point, the car was already 15 years old. But there's no title information before 1985. So from 1985, my brother ends up owning it originally in 2008. So all of that title information or transfer information is here. So we're making progress. We're beginning to learn some things about the car. However, at this point, I don't know where the car was from 1970 until 1985. Now, 1985 was an awful long time ago. That was 40 years ago. So for 40 years, this car has been in the Northeast. We had to replace one floor pan on the driver's side. The rest of the floor pan is in excellent shape. So the odds are it was moisture getting onto the carpet or into the driver's side floor pan from rain, from boots, from all of those things, because there's no rust on the rest of that floor pan, which I guess is pretty unusual for Camaros of that era. But we still don't know where the car came from. I was watching one of Dennis Collins' videos on Coffee Walk. I don't know if any of you follow that, but Dennis is always searching out these vintage cars. And he went to rescue a Corvette, an older Corvette. And he was telling the story about that Corvette. And in the story, it was mentioned that what do we call that? That the National Corvettes Restorers Society got access to some of the General Motors ship data, and that's what they call it, the shipping data report, that General Motors gave them exclusive rights to those ship reports. Now, GM has no records of production for a Camaro before 1977. So I can't go to the GM Heritage Center and ask for that information because GM simply doesn't have it. So all of this is just forensics. It's me trying to piece all this together, me trying to understand the history of this car and how it traveled through time. So I went to the NCRS website, and sure as hell, there is a link, or there is a page on the website, on the menu, that allows you to get to the place where you order this ship data report. So I did. I signed up for it. It was not cheap. They wanted $60 for this piece of paper. But somebody at their headquarters had to go through that data to figure this out. So the $60 was worth the money to get some origin information for the Camaro. Here's where things get really interesting. This is not a Northeast car. In fact, this is a Southern car. So far south, as a matter of fact, it was out of Clearwater, Florida. So this car was shipped originally from GM to Jim Quinlan Chevrolet in Clearwater, Florida. Now, when I did some research on Jim Quinlan Chevrolet, turns out that his dealership was somewhat known for selling period muscle cars. So I've noticed online that there's several cars that have come up for sale or auction that list the Jim Quinlan Chevrolet as the place where the car was originally delivered and then picked up. I went online to see if I could find out anything about Jim Quinlan Chevrolet, and other than a few lawsuits, I have no idea what that's about, nothing shows up. In fact, Jim Quinlan was bought out by a national auto chain. So I can't learn anything more about Jim Quinlan. This is where you guys can all help me. If you are familiar with Jim Quinlan Chevrolet, if you are from Florida, born and raised, if you've been down there, Jim Quinlan, they changed hands about 8-10 years ago. I am really interested in finding out any information about Jim Quinlan Chevrolet, if you guys know it, so I can begin to find and piece together more of the origin story about this Camaro. This is actually getting to be fun and kind of exciting. If you know anything about the Jim Quinlan Chevrolet, if you could just leave a comment and then somehow we'll figure out how we can talk to each other. Also, I'm really interested in some period photographs of the dealership. Now, this thing was reasonably famous as a muscle car dealer back in the day, then I'm sure there must be some photographs of the dealership that exist. In fact, who knows, maybe even a picture of my car on the lot is possible. I love this stuff. I love the hunt. I love trying to figure this all out. When I get down to South Carolina and we spend some more time with the car, My buddy Jeff and I, Jeff has the car right now for several reasons. And if we can spend some time with the car, climbing under it, over it, through it, and I'm hoping that I can point out some of the features of the car, and then through that exam try to figure out more about how the car might have left the factory. Guys, this is fun, this is exciting, this is as far as I've been able to get so far. Knowing where this car started from is exciting, because that means for the first 15 years it is potentially true that this car spent its time in the South, which would explain why there's as little rust on it as there appears to be. We haven't started searching body panels to see if there's a lot of Bondo under it, but right now the entire undercarriage of the car is basically immaculate. Everything is there, it's good and solid. So if it had been a Northeast car, and if that car had been driven around here in the winters, in the salt, in the snow, on a regular basis, the car would not look like that, trust me. Born and raised here in New Hampshire, I know what happens to cars after 10 or 15 years, especially those early cars from the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Those cars were not prepped well from the factory to begin with. They weren't prepped to survive winters up here in the Northeast. They rotted out very quickly. So I'm thinking that this car spent a lot of its time in Florida or in the South before it managed to get up here in 1985. Guys, if you think you can help me, please let me know, leave a comment. Also, thanks for being here. If you enjoyed this video, this kind of content, give it a thumbs up, because I want to do more of that as we move on. I want to talk more about the culture and the history. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Guys, I will see you in the next video.